Welcome to the Guidelines podcast, a once every 2 weeks discussion about applying user-centered design within South Africa. My name is Jonathan Copeland, and on this episode of Guidelines, I sit down with UX researcher as well as co-founder and co-director of Monkey and River, Rendani Kruger. Having studied software development, co-founded his own UX consulting firm, as well as currently completing a PhD about digital innovation in South Africa's public sector, Rendani has a valuable perspective on the role of research within user-centered design. We met up at Rendani's office at the University of Pretoria and spoke about his PhD research, digital minimalism, as well as affordances within design. Enjoy. Rendani, thank you so much for joining us on Guidelines.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's really good. I got to know Rendani in 2017. As I was saying with my interview with Jacques, when I first started researching UX in Pretoria, at University of Pretoria, there were a couple of names that came up, and it was Helene Gelderblom, Jacques Brosens, and Rendani Kruger. And it was cool to get to know you guys, and I ended up working at Monkey and River, so I've worked closely with you guys, and I really respect you, and I think you do good work. So it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. So preparing for the episode, I wanted to prepare for it. Obviously, I know you as a person, but I wanted to research you and see what you're up to online and sort of kind of get the nitty-gritty on what you get up to. And compared to other guests I've had on the show, it was a bit more difficult to find information about what you've been working on. There's no, your Instagram is pretty sparse. Your LinkedIn has the bare bones. It has what's important, but nothing more than that. And that's a theme that I keep seeing come across your online presence. And I remember the conversation that we had a while ago where you were showing me your phone, and I don't know if either you'd done it or you were saying that you wanted to do it, but basically you were saying that you wanted to grayscale your screen so that there wasn't as much bright colors that were showing up that weren't going to distract you. And I thought that was really interesting. And I'm wondering, is there something behind that mindset on maybe less is more? What are your thoughts?
Okay.
Just gonna. There you go, Karen.
Maybe we should start with what UX is. That will guide us to answering your question.
Cool.
So,
perfect.
If you want to define it simply, you'd say it's the feeling a person has towards a system. In our context, so UX in another context would be the feelings towards an organization or whatever. And then if you read more about UX, you come to the concept of affordance and how there's a confusion between affordance and system function. So system functions are things that a system can do, but affordance is the relationship between the user and the system or object. So if you look at it that way, then there are things that people can use objects for, which is not necessarily the purpose of that object.
The intended purpose, yeah.
The intended purpose. So you are supposed to sit on a chair, but you can also lift a chair and throw it at somebody. And that has implications, but that is also an affordance of that chair. So if you think about it in terms of technology, then we often design systems with purposes that we intend for users, but sometimes, or usually, they use it in ways that we didn't think that they would, and that might have other implications. So that's the discussion I would like to have.
Okay.
If we take social media as an example,
the biggest one I think of is the last election cycle and Twitter and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
there are many examples in social media.
Yeah.
So it was a college app, so where students get together and can have a big chat online and all of that. But the affordance of social media is clearly a lot different from the intended system function. And when we create new technologies, we should rather consider affordance, in my opinion, than simply what systems can do. And if we start doing that, then a large number of social and economical questions come up too. So if the West is creating all these new technologies that people can use, what are the impacts that those technologies are having on audiences that are not necessarily their users? And in South Africa, we can directly see the influence of that with these large online stores. So Takealot has taken over in South Africa. It's become a very large online store, and there are not many people making a salary from that. And if that becomes bigger, it might take over ShopRite and game stores, which are employing a lot of people in South Africa, but we don't even think about it that way because we're so fascinated with the idea of just clicking on a button online and getting the object delivered to us.
Sure.
So
the possibility instead of the actual implications.
Yes. It's a very important question that we should ask.
Okay. And in your own personal life, you've almost taken that and done a practical implication of that as well.
Yeah, so I've done a bit of reading about the psychological impact social media might have, and there are a lot of self-esteem issues that you can get from overusing social media, and it's not clear what that boundary is. You can't say you can have 5 minutes of social media a day and that's fine, you won't get self-esteem issues. So until those limits have been set, I find it quite risky to do that, to use social media intensively, because I don't want to get psychological conditions because of my overuse of technology. So if an organization like Facebook or Google was considering that sort of impact, then I don't think their designs would have been the same way it is designed currently.
It's difficult, and I think for whenever you make a product, I mean, if you look at, say, for example, take it back to Twitter. I can remember a bunch of tweets that I saw that were directed at Jack, Twitter's CEO, and they were talking about this thing of like, you need to make sure that certain type of people aren't on the platform. It's a very tricky line to walk.
Yes.
And whenever you make a product, I mean, say for example, let's just take our smartphones. They're meant to be useful. They're meant to be as effective as possible. But what's the word again that you said?
Affordance.
The affordances of that being such an effective, sticky, useful product is that it can get out of hand.
Yeah, so if you read further about design, they say it's easier for designers to design signifiers, signifiers being the signal of intended use, rather than designing the affordance. So let's just use the chair as an example again. If people are not sitting on the chair, designer might come and make an arrow that says sit here, and that gives people the indication that that is the intended system function. So it's at a higher level where it's not only a design concern regarding system use, it's also the initial business concept. When you think of creating a new product, especially with software where we can scale it quite easily for everybody to use quickly, we should really start thinking about what are the other possibilities of the software, and what might the social impact be, and so forth. But it's a question that should be asked at business level, I believe, not or designers should work with business people to solve those problems. And it makes it more difficult, but I think it's a concern that more people should be worrying about.
Do you think this doesn't sound like design thinking?
Yeah, so it is design.
It's a branch of design thinking.
Yes, so it's design, or it's almost engineering. So if you're creating a new concept, where do you say, when do you say this is design, or when is it engineering, or is it when you're creating the entire product, or is it only when you put the pretty pictures on it?
How would you advocate for this? I mean, especially in an environment like, let's just say, for example, you're working on a health app, for example, for a smartphone that you're wanting to scale across the country. Now, there's going to be a certain amount of budget. There's going to be, like, how do you advocate for this? Because it's big questions that we should be asking.
Yes.
But how do you make space for that in a business plan? When there's a budget, when there's employees, when there's a deadline, like, we should be doing this, but how?
Yeah, so it's a fundamental mind shift, I believe, because when we design a new product, whatever it might be, the first thing we ask is what should it be able to do, and that is already thinking system functions. If you start with affordances, then you are not only asking what should the system be able to do, but rather what is the implication of designing a system like this.
Okay.
So it starts at the beginning.
Okay. I'd like to shift the conversation, and obviously you've done your honors, you've done your masters, and now you're doing your PhD. So you've been working in research for a while, as well as lecturing software development at University of Pretoria. Could you tell me about some of the research that you've been working on and what you've learned from it?
Okay, so I've changed my topic quite far when Helene was my supervisor.
Okay.
So I did my master's in usability, and when I finished it, I wanted to continue with my PhD in usability, and then she asked me, aren't you going to get bored of this? So I changed it completely. And then there was a business project that we were doing where there was a opportunity to gather a lot of data quite quickly, and that's why I chose to do that.
On usability?
Not on usability, on a completely different.
Okay.
It's around innovation.
Okay.
What innovation is another topic we can talk about. There are.
How so? I mean, maybe we can.
So there are people that say innovation is problem solving, and people say innovation is finding new opportunities to design things for, or you can say it's creative thinking. The view that I take is that it's the entire process from an idea through implementation and finally use. So the whole process is innovation. We can have another discussion about that. I can talk an hour about
Okay, cool.
Different perspectives regarding that.
Okay.
So what I produced in my master's was a methodology people can use to compare the usability of different systems or similar systems. So I got people to use different websites to book airline tickets, and then I saw what the differences were, and by doing that you can say how a specific business can improve the usability of their system to make it better than the usability of another business's system. And I think that's pretty important for customer-facing solutions, because that is it has become the primary contact point for a lot of businesses. So ensuring that your interface to the customer is better than your competitor is competitive advantage for you quite directly. So that's what I designed my master's on. So I produced a methodology that people can use to do that.
Okay. And what were some of the insights from your master's?
So I came up with a bunch of guidelines that you can use. I did it in a lab setting that constraints influences from the environment.
Okay.
But some people would disagree with me because people use software at home. But to start comparing that becomes difficult because everybody's home is different and you are trying to emphasize the comparison on the system and not environments. So it gets pretty technical and I don't really, that can also be a very large discussion.
Fair enough, okay.
So what I'm doing my PhD on is encouraging innovation in South African public sector, because one of the implications of technology moving so fast and humanity not really considering the implication of technology before designing them and only seeing the implication in retrospect, is that we have fallen very far behind. So I don't know if you've heard of the concept of the digital divide.
Yes, yeah. Could you explain it for any listeners?
So the digital divide suggests that there are a lot of capabilities that you have if you have access to technology and you know how to use it above people that don't. So in a country like South Africa, there are a lot of people that are not educated or poorly educated, and they don't have money to buy technology. So they are in another sector of the digital divide as compared to people like us that know how to use technology and are very comfortable with it. We can afford whatever technology we want. So if we just continue buying new technology and upgrading and designing all of these systems, what is going to happen to the class of people that don't understand technology and can't use it at all?
Keep getting bigger and bigger.
So a fundamental question I have is, so I don't know if you've heard of the concept of the Industry 4.0.
No, please tell me.
So it's the merger of all the different types of technologies. So you get IoT that connects devices onto the internet and devices can talk to each other. And you get biological systems. So it's predicted somewhere soon that your body will be able to speak over the internet to an object, and it's that sort of idea. It includes blockchain and all of the new technologies we are using today. There's a more formal definition for it, which I haven't memorized, but in any case,
it's okay.
What is the implication of all of these technologies on the digital divide?
Yeah. So it's not just smartphones now. It's like it's the sort of connected home. It's all
yeah.
Things, yeah.
So, is it going to be a requirement in the future that, or it's already a requirement, I guess, that you understand how to use all of these technologies in the workplace? So when robots can do all of the tasks that people who don't understand technologies are doing now, what are those people going to be doing? So it's a difficult question to answer, but that's why I want to encourage innovation in the public sector.
Yeah, Rendani's wall is covered with sticky notes. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. What is that for?
So I did a bunch of research for a client that I don't want to mention now.
Okay, fair enough.
There's a lot of restrictions to innovation, like a lack of real-time data to feed innovation is one of the restrictions.
Okay.
That you can see there's a lot of sticky notes.
Yes, very
so there is 24 sticky notes about the operational perspective and 26 from a management perspective.
Sure, okay.
So But these are all different restrictions.
Okay.
So why a particular organization is not innovating effectively.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that I can scale that to answer a broader question about the public sector.
Is this not called service design? I think that's or is it associated with service design for companies? So for example, you're looking at like a delivery service. It's not just the actual how people go onto the website maybe order something, but also how the truck drivers navigate things and how the packages. Is that service design, or does this come into it, or your PhD?
Yeah, so my PhD, I'm having this conversation with myself as well. I think it fits more into business management than it does into UX.
Yeah.
But UX is very broad, so I can find a way to fit it in as well.
This is how I keep the podcast going.
So there's a difference between UX and cumulative UX. So there's instantaneous UX and cumulative UX. Do you know the difference?
Never heard of that.
So the instantaneous UX is when
Which you're actually interacting with.
When you're actually interacting with the technology.
The experience from using it, the technology.
Yes.
Okay.
But when you use specific organizations' software tool or whatever interface they present, you have some ideas about that organization, in particular feelings already about that organization before the interaction, and then you generate feelings through the interaction with the organization, and then whatever the result may be influences what your perception is of the organization after the interaction. And that builds over time with all of the interaction you have with that organization in the various forms, and that presents cumulative UX. So the feeling you have now about what business do you use frequently?
I use
A bank. What's your bank?
Standard Bank.
Standard Bank.
Okay.
So you have interacted with Standard Bank a lot of times already, and you have a particular feeling about Standard Bank.
Yes.
That's the cumulative UX.
Okay, cool.
And then when you interact with Standard Bank at a branch, that's an instantaneous or instant UX.
So cumulative would be a customer's perspective over the course of their life cycle interacting with a brand.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Okay.
And so that's what you're working on.
So that is what. That's how I see service design fitting in.
Okay, I see.
So you're trying to design more cumulative UX rather than just specific instances. My research is more about innovation. So I consider a whole lot of products like apps and things like that, and technologies like the blockchain and whatever it might be.
Innovative. Okay.
Yes, to encourage innovation in South Africa.
Okay.
Because I think it is dangerous for South Africa not to be innovating. And you don't see much coming from the public sector in South Africa. We adopt new technologies from all over the place, but we're not really designing our own things.
I wonder about that.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the reason, or one of the reasons why I started this podcast, is I want to figure out, like, what does a South African UX perspective look like? Because I think a lot of the times, naturally, we'll get a lot of our systems and ways that we do things from more of a Western context.
Yes.
That's where we get our technology from. But like, how would we? What's the process of figuring that out here? Because we have all different design choices.
My view on this is, when we design application, we should, or of anything actually, we should consider the potential users of the systems before we build these things.
Yeah.
Right? And that's how we would do it in South Africa.
Okay.
So an example I want to use, or I use a lot, is we have this big wall in Pretoria called Menlyn, and at Menlyn Mall, there's a big taxi crisis with a lot of traffic, taxis standing on the road still.
Yeah.
But when you design that mall, why don't you consider that everybody who's going to work there is going to take a taxi there, and then you build a taxi rank?
Mm-hmm.
And if you start thinking like that, then we're solving South African problems, which is what we should be doing.
Sure. Okay.
And another benefit of doing it like that is we might come up with solutions to problems that exist elsewhere as well, and we can start selling South African innovations to other countries that might be facing similar problems.
Sure. In a previous episode, we interviewed your co-partner and co-founder of Monkey and River, Jacques Brosson. So I think we've spoken about Monkey and River. What all this talk of innovations, though, got me thinking about tax innovation.
Yes.
I know that you're involved with tax innovation. Could you maybe tell us about what that is?
So I'm doing a technological consultation for tax innovation.
Okay.
So they incubate a lot of businesses, or let me rather say Monkey and River is doing technological consultation for tax innovation.
Cool.
So students have a lot of ideas, and there's this idea that we should start creating small businesses from universities, where people still are not caught up in the rat race yet, and so the University of Pretoria is trying to encourage students to be innovative, and that's why we have an incubator called Tax Innovation on campus. Monkey and River has a lot of expertise regarding the implementation of technology, and that is the sort of thing we do for them.
Okay.
But we also advise or consult a range of other businesses on how their software should be looking, and typically design interfaces or sometimes develop software for those for our customers. We should also be doing more of the what is the implication of the technology we're developing.
Okay.
I think humanity is still trying to figure out how to do that.
Rendani, thank you so much for making the time. I've really enjoyed this interview. If people wanted to find out more about you or the research you're doing, or even Monkey and River, how would you recommend that they go about that?
So you can share my UK email address.
Okay, cool.
On your podcast
I'll do that. I'll put it in
on
the
your
show notes,
podcast, yes. And then people can email me. I'll be more than willing to respond.
Awesome. Rendani, thank you so much.
All right.
Cool.